They laughed at a homeless veteran digging in the dirt until his dog uncovered something worth $265 million, and suddenly everyone wanted him gone. Ethan Walker had nothing left. No home, no family, just the mountains of Montana and a German shepherd that refused to leave his side. People in town called him crazy, said he was chasing ghosts. But one night the dog stopped and started digging in the same spot like his life depended on it. What Ethan found beneath that floor would drag him into a secret that powerful men had buried for decades. Before we go further, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. The cold in Montana didn't creep in. It settled, quiet, patient, like something that knew it had all night. Ethan Walker lay on his back in the corner of the abandoned hay barn, one arm tucked under his jacket and the other resting across his chest. The boards above him groaned with the wind, old wood shifting like tired bones. Through the cracks in the walls, thin lines of moonlight stretched across the dirt floor, cutting the darkness into sharp angles. He didn't sleep so much as drift, never fully gone, never fully here. His eyes snapped open before the sound even registered. Metal. A faint hollow clink somewhere beyond the barn. His body moved before his mind caught up. He rolled to his side, hand closing around a length of broken wood he kept within reach. The grip tightened automatically. Thumb aligned, elbow tucked, muscle memory snapping into place like it had 1,000 times before. Breath slowed. Listen. Nothing. Just wind. Then another sound, closer this time, not loud, just enough. Ethan pushed himself up slowly. His boots silent against the packed dirt. His shoulders stayed low, posture angled. Weight shifting forward on the balls of his feet as he moved toward the opening in the barn wall. Outside, the land stretched wide and empty. Rolling fields swallowed by darkness, broken only by the jagged outline of trees at the far edge. The old farmhouse stood in the distance, black hollow windows staring out like sockets. He scanned left, then right. No movement, no lights, no engines, nothing. Behind him, a low, steady exhale broke the silence. Ethan didn't turn. He didn't have to. Easy, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Bruno stepped forward from the shadows. The German shepherd moved without a sound. His coat caught just enough moonlight to reveal the faint gray along his muzzle. He didn't bark, didn't whine. He just stood there, body rigid, ears forward, eyes locked on something beyond the tree line. Ethan followed his gaze. Nothing. Just darkness layered over more darkness. But Bruno didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't relax. Ethan lowered the piece of wood slightly. His grip didn't loosen. "You hear something?" he asked. Bruno didn't react to the words, only to whatever was out there. Ethan studied him for a moment longer. The dog's posture was wrong, not alert in the usual way, not reactive, focused, like he'd already decided something. A gust of wind swept across the field, carrying the smell of frozen earth and distant pine. It brushed past Ethan's face, sharp and clean, and for a split second, something flickered behind his eyes. Heat, sand, the crack of something distant. He blinked hard. The field came back, the barn, the cold in his breath. Bruno. Ethan exhaled slowly through his nose and shifted his weight back, stepping away from the opening. "Nothing out there," he said, more to himself than the dog. Bruno didn't move, still staring. Ethan turned his back on the field and walked deeper into the barn, dropping back down onto the flattened pile of old hay that passed for a bed. The cold bit through his jacket immediately. He pulled it tighter around himself, tucking his hands in close. For a while there was only the wind again, and the creak of wood, and the quiet rhythm of breathing, his and Bruno's. But the dog never lay down. Ethan could feel it without looking. That stillness, that attention, like a wire pulled tight and waiting. He closed his eyes anyway. Tried to. Minutes passed. Maybe longer. Then clink. Only, that sound hit sharper this time. Closer. Ethan's eyes snapped open again. He didn't sit up right away, just listened. Counted his breathing. Waited. Bruno moved first. One step, then another. Slow, deliberate. Toward the open side of the barn. Ethan pushed himself up again. More controlled this time, less reaction, more intent. "What is it?" he murmured. Bruno stopped just at the edge of the shadows, ears forward, body stiff, tail still. The dog let out a low sound, not a growl, not quite a whine, something in between, something restrained. Ethan stepped beside him and followed his line of sight again. The trees, the old farmhouse beyond them, black against the sky. Nothing moved, nothing flashed, nothing made sense. But the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt occupied. Ethan's jaw tightened. He shifted his stance, slightly adjusting his footing on instinct, giving himself a clearer angle on the field. His eyes tracked the edges of the tree line, looking for breaks, for shadows that didn't belong. Still nothing. But Bruno didn't lie. Never had. Not there. Not here. Ethan glanced down at him. "You see something?" he said quietly. Bruno's ears twitched. Just once. And then he took a step forward out into the open. Ethan didn't follow. Not yet. He watched as the dog moved a few yards ahead, then stopped again. Same posture, same focus, same unwavering attention toward the darkness near the farmhouse. A long moment passed, then another. Ethan exhaled slowly. Cold air fogged in front of him. "Yeah," he muttered. "Something's out there." Bruno didn't turn back, didn't look at him, just stood there, staring into the dark like he already knew exactly where to go. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt something shift. Not fear. Not yet. Something closer to recognition, like the beginning of a pattern he hadn't seen. But the dog had. Ethan tightened his jacket, eyes still locked on the distant silhouette of the abandoned farmhouse. Then he stepped forward, one step into the cold. One step closer to whatever Bruno had already found. The wind carried another faint sound across the field. Metal, soft, precise and waiting. Ethan didn't say anything this time. Neither did Bruno. They just stood there, two figures in the dark, staring into a place the rest of the world had already forgotten. But not the dog. Never the dog. Bruno didn't move for a long time. The wind pushed through the open field, brushing past his coat. But he stood, like something carved into the night. Fixed. Unmoving. Locked onto that same point beyond the trees. Ethan stayed a few steps behind him, watching, waiting, counting. 1, 2, 3. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. No light flickering through the farmhouse windows. Just that same hollow quiet. But it wasn't empty anymore. Ethan felt it now. Something subtle. Like pressure in the air before a storm. Bruno took another step forward. Then another. Slow, controlled, not wandering, not curious, tracking. Ethan exhaled through his nose. Shoulders tightening under his jacket. That word settled in his mind without permission. Tracking. He'd seen that posture before. Not in Montana. Not in a quiet field behind a broken barn. Somewhere hotter. Louder. Dust in the air. Boots sinking into sand. So he blinked, once hard. The field came back. "Bruno," he said quietly. The dog didn't look back. Didn't even flick an ear. Ethan stepped forward now. Boots crunching softly over the frozen ground. He didn't rush, didn't call out again. Just closed the distance. When he reached Bruno's side, the dog finally shifted, just enough to angle his body slightly, still facing forward but aware now that Ethan was there. "Show me," Ethan muttered. Bruno moved, straight toward the farmhouse. Morning came slowly. A pale gray light crept over the hills, thinning the darkness just enough to reveal how far they'd walked. Ethan stood at the edge of the tree line now, the old farmhouse looming ahead, closer than it had any right to be. The place looked worse in daylight. Boards nailed across some of the windows, others left open, the glass long gone. The roof sagged slightly toward one side like the whole structure had been leaning for years and just never finished falling. The land around it was uneven. Dead grass tangled with patches of bare earth. No clear path. No sign of recent traffic. Then Ethan crouched down. His fingers brushed over the ground. A faint indentation. Tire tracks. Old, but not that old. Not 30 years old. He straightened slowly. Bruno circled once near the front of the house and then moved toward the side, nose low, sniffing, stopping, adjusting direction. Not random, never random. Ethan watched him work. "You've been here before," he said under his breath. Bruno didn't respond, just kept moving. Ethan followed, keeping a few steps back this time, giving the dog space, letting him lead. They reached a patch of disturbed earth near the side of the house. Bruno stopped. He lowered his head and started digging fast. Not frantic. Precise. Each paw stroke deliberate. Focused on one exact point. Dirt kicked back behind him in short bursts. His breathing stayed steady, controlled, even as the ground gave way beneath his claws. Ethan stepped closer, watching. "Hey," he said quietly. "Easy." Bruno didn't slow down, didn't even acknowledge him. Ethan crouched beside him and brushed away some of the loose dirt. His fingers hit something solid. Not rock, not wood. Metal. He cleared a little more. A flat surface. Rusted. Cold. A metal plate. Ethan paused. His hand hovered just above it. Bruno stopped digging and stepped back half a pace. Eyes fixed on the spot. Waiting, Ethan glanced at him, then back at the metal. He knocked on it once with his knuckles. A hollow sound echoed beneath. Not deep, but not shallow either. He frowned. Knocked again. Same sound. Ethan leaned back on his heels, scanning the ground around them. No obvious seams, no hinges. Just dirt and dead grass and that one buried piece of metal. "Why here?" he murmured. Bruno shifted his weight slightly, stepping closer again. Nose almost touching the exposed edge. A low sound slipped from his throat. Not warning, not fear. Insistence. Ethan wiped his hands on his jeans and stood. The farmhouse loomed beside them, its windows like empty eyes watching. He looked back at the barn in the distance, then back at the metal plate, then at Bruno. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" Bruno held his gaze for a second, just one, then looked back at the ground. Ethan let out a slow breath. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Didn't think so." By midday, the town had already started moving. Ethan kept his head down as he walked past the gas station, Bruno at his side. People noticed. They always did. Not because he did anything loud or obvious, but because he didn't. Didn't talk. Didn't linger. Didn't belong. "Hey, Walker." A voice called from the porch of the general store. Ethan didn't stop. Didn't turn. "Still camping out in that old barn?" The voice continued, followed by a short laugh. Another voice joined in. "He's got that mutt for company. Guess that's all he needs." Ethan kept walking, boots steady, pace unchanged. Bruno didn't react either. Didn't look, didn't break stride. They moved past the store, past the parked trucks, and past the cluster of men who watched them go with that same familiar expression, half amusement, half dismissal. Ethan didn't hear the rest. Or maybe he did. It just didn't stick. His mind was somewhere else. Back at the farmhouse. Back at the metal plate. Back at the way Bruno had looked at it. They returned as the sun dipped low again. The light stretched long across the field, turning everything gold for a moment. Before the cold started to creep back in, Ethan carried a small pry bar he'd taken from behind the barn. Nothing fancy, but solid. Bruno went straight to the spot. No hesitation, no searching, just straight to it. Ethan crouched beside him again, clearing away what little dirt had settled back over the plate. He wedged the pry bar under the edge, paused, listened. Nothing. No movement. No sound. When he pushed down, the metal shifted slightly with a dull scrape. Ethan froze, waited. Still nothing. He adjusted his grip and pushed harder. The edge lifted just enough to slip his fingers underneath. He pulled. The plate came free with a slow grinding sound, revealing darkness beneath. Not shallow. Not natural. A space. Ethan leaned forward slightly, peering into it. Cold air rose up from below. Still. Stale. Bruno stepped closer, nose twitching, then stopped just at the edge. Didn't go down. Didn't back away. Just watched. Ethan sat back again, staring at the opening. A hole in the ground. Too clean, too deliberate, too hidden. He didn't say anything for a long time, didn't move. Just listened to the quiet, to the wind, to the absence of everything else. Then, finally, he spoke. "All right," he said, his voice low. "We're not leaving this." Bruno's ears flicked once. That was all. But it was enough. Ethan looked down into the darkness again. Something about it pulled at him. Not curiosity. Not exactly. Recognition. The kind that didn't come from understanding. The kind that came from experience. From knowing what it meant when something was buried this carefully. He stood slowly, backing away from the opening. "We do this right," he muttered. Slow. Bruno stayed where he was, still watching the hole. Still waiting. Like he already knew. This wasn't the end of anything. This was just the first layer. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He stayed in the barn, back against the wall, eyes open long after the moon had shifted across the sky. Every creak in the wood pulled his attention. Every gust of wind made him tilt his head, listening past it, through it, for something else. Bruno lay near the entrance, but not fully down, not relaxed. Even resting, the dog stayed angled toward the farmhouse, watching. Ethan noticed. He always noticed. At some point, the cold settled deeper into his bones. Not sharp anymore, just constant, like the silence. He closed his eyes once, just for a second, and the darkness changed. Heat, noise, a sharp crack in the distance. His body reacted before his mind did. He jerked upright, breath tight, hand already reaching for the wood beside him. The barn snapped back into place, quiet, empty, cold. Bruno didn't move, but one ear tilted back slightly, catching the shift in Ethan's breathing. "I'm good," Ethan muttered. The words came out rough, unnecessary, but he said them anyway. At first light, he was already moving. No hesitation now, no second guessing. He didn't go straight to the farmhouse. Instead, he circled wide, keeping his distance. Approaching from the far edge of the property, his steps were slower this time. Deliberate. Eyes scanning not just the house, but the ground, the trees, the space in between. Patterns. Breaks. Anything that didn't belong. Bruno stayed just ahead of him, but closer than before. Not pulling, not leading fully. Matching pace, working with him. They moved along the outer edge of the land. The place felt different in daylight, less haunted, more wrong. Ethan stopped near a cluster of old fence posts half buried in the dirt. He crouched again, brushing away frost with his fingers. The wood was splintered, gray with age. But the wire, what was left of it, wasn't completely rusted through. Not as old as it should have been. He stood slowly, eyes narrowing. 30 years, he murmured. That's what Hank had said. 30 years since anyone touched this place. Wood rotted. Metal didn't lie. Ethan turned his head slightly, scanning the tree line. No fresh cuts, no clear paths. But something about the spacing felt intentional. Bruno stopped ahead. Ethan looked up. The dog was standing near what used to be a driveway, barely visible now, just two faint tracks where grass didn't grow quite the same. Ethan stepped closer. His boots followed the lines. One step, then another. The ground dipped slightly where tires had once pressed into it. He followed it with his eyes. The tracks curved toward the side of the farmhouse. Faded, but not gone. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Someone's been here," he said. Bruno glanced back at him this time. Just a flick, enough to confirm. They reached the side of the house again. The hole in the ground sat where they'd left it. Metal plate, leaning against the dirt beside it. The dark opening below still untouched. Ethan didn't go near it right away. He moved past it, toward the structure. The farmhouse door hung slightly off its hinges, but it wasn't broken, not forced, just aged. He stopped a few feet from it, listened. Nothing inside. No movement, no shifting boards. Just the hollow quiet of an empty space. Ethan reached out and pushed the door. It opened with a slow, dry groan. He didn't step in. Not yet. He leaned slightly to the side, peering through the gap. Dust. Faded furniture. Light cutting through broken slats. Stillness. He pushed the door wider, waited, counted, then stepped inside. Bruno moved in first. Low, controlled, head level with his shoulders, scanning. Ethan followed. The air inside was colder. Still, it carried a smell. Old wood, dust, something faint underneath it. Not decay. Not quite. Just closed. The floor creaked under Ethan's weight, but the sound didn't echo the way he expected. Too contained. Like the space was absorbing it. He paused in the entryway, eyes adjusting, then moved left, clearing the first room. Empty. A broken table. 2 chairs. Nothing else. He shifted to the next doorway. Bruno was already there, waiting. Ethan gave a small nod, moved in. Same story. Dust. Silence. No signs of recent living. But no destruction either. No broken glass scattered across the floor. No graffiti. No animals nesting in corners. Too clean. Ethan slowed his pace. His breathing evened out. His steps became quieter. Measured. Every movement, intentional. He moved deeper into the house, room by room, checking corners, scanning ceilings, tracking exits. Old habits. Still there. Still sharp. Bruno stayed just ahead, occasionally pausing, nose twitching, adjusting direction slightly before continuing. They reached the back hallway. Narrow, darker. The light barely reached this far. Ethan stopped. Something felt off. He didn't know why. Just pressure again, like the space was watching him back. He shifted his weight. Listened. Nothing. But his hand tightened around the pry bar. "Clear it," he muttered. Bruno moved. Slow, careful, step by step down the hallway. Ethan followed, staying just behind his shoulder. Halfway down, Bruno stopped. Completely. His body stiffened. Ethan froze with him. Didn't ask. Didn't move. Bruno's head tilted slightly. Then he took one small step back. Not retreating, just adjusting. Ethan's eyes dropped to the floor, right in front of them. A thin line stretched across the hallway, almost invisible. Wire. Ethan's chest tightened. He crouched slowly, leaning in. The wire ran from one side of the wall to the other, tied low, just enough to catch a foot, just enough to trigger something. He followed it with his eyes. To the left, then to the right, where it disappeared behind a loose section of wall paneling. Ethan didn't touch it, didn't test it. He just stared, long enough for the meaning to settle in. Not abandoned, he said quietly. And Bruno didn't move, didn't blink. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folding knife. He shifted his angle, staying clear of the line, and carefully cut the wire near the edge. No sound, no reaction. He waited anyway, counted, listened. Nothing. But that didn't change anything. He straightened slowly, eyes scanning the hallway again. This place wasn't forgotten. It was quiet on purpose, left alone on purpose, protected. Ethan looked down at Bruno. The dog met his gaze this time. Steady, certain. Ethan nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "We're not the first ones back." Bruno turned his head slightly, looking deeper into the house. Then, slowly, he moved forward again. And this time, Ethan followed, without hesitation. The hallway swallowed them. Light faded behind them with every step, and thinning into gray, then into something closer to shadow. The air grew heavier the deeper they went. Like the house had lungs, and they were walking straight into its chest. Ethan adjusted his pace automatically. Slower now. Heel down first, then roll. Weight controlled. Every step placed, not taken. Bruno moved ahead, silent as always. But something about his posture had shifted again. Lower now, tighter, the kind of movement that came from training, not instinct. Ethan noticed, filed it away. The hallway ended in a narrow opening that led into what had once been the kitchen. The room was larger than the others, more open, more exposed. Ethan stopped just before the threshold. Didn't step in. Not yet. He leaned slightly to the side, peering in. Dust floated in the thin light, coming through a cracked window. Cabinets hung crooked on the walls, their doors half open. A rusted sink sat beneath the window, stained dark from years of neglect. But again, no signs of decay the way there should have been. No collapsed sections, no water damage spreading through the floor. The place wasn't alive, but it wasn't dead either. Bruno stepped in first. His paws made almost no sound on the wood. He paused in the center of the room, head turning slightly left, then right, scanning. Ethan watched him for a second longer, then followed. The floor creaked beneath his weight, loud in the stillness. But nothing reacted. No movement. No shift in the walls. Just the echo of old wood reminding him he was there. Ethan moved along the edge of the room instead of crossing through the center. Habit. Keep distance from open space. Reduce angles. When he reached the far side and stopped near a second doorway that led into what looked like a storage room. Before stepping through, he glanced back at Bruno. The dog hadn't moved. Still in the center, still watching something, but not the doorway, not the walls, the floor. Ethan's eyes dropped. Nothing obvious. Just wood, old boards worn smooth by time. He stepped closer. "Bruno," he said quietly. The dog shifted his weight once, then lowered his head, and tapped the floor lightly with one paw. Once, twice. Ethan crouched. His fingers brushed against the wood, cold, dry. He pressed down slightly, solid. He moved his hand a few inches to the right. Pressed again. A faint give. Barely noticeable, but there. Ethan stilled. His breath slowed. He knocked lightly with his knuckles. A dull sound. Then again, some a few inches over. Hollow. He sat back slightly on his heels, eyes narrowing. "Yeah," he muttered. Bruno stepped back just enough to give him space. Watching. Waiting. Ethan pulled the pry bar from his belt. Held it loosely for a second. Listening. Nothing. No shift in the house. No response. He slid the tip of the bar into the seam between two boards. Paused. Then applied pressure. The wood resisted at first, then gave. A sharp crack split the silence. Ethan flinched. Not visibly, but his shoulders tightened. Breath cutting short for half a second. The sound echoed in his head. Not wood, something else. Louder, closer. He blinked hard. The kitchen snapped back into place. Dust. Silence. Cold. Bruno didn't react to the noise. Just watched him. Ethan exhaled slowly through his nose. Reset. Focus. Then he pushed again. The board lifted higher this time, nails pulling free with a dry, splintering sound. Ethan worked it loose, then set it aside carefully. Underneath. Darkness. Not just a gap, a space, a drop. Ethan leaned forward slightly, angling his head to look inside. Concrete. A set of narrow steps leading down. Not old farm construction, not improvised. Built deliberately. Bruno stepped closer again, nose hovering just above the opening. Then he stopped. Didn't go down, didn't pull away, just held position. Ethan studied him. "You're not going first," he said quietly. Bruno didn't argue. Didn't move. Ethan adjusted his grip on the pry bar, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flashlight. He clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness below. Concrete walls, clean lines, no debris, but no collapse. Whoever built this hadn't cut corners. Ethan angled the light down the steps. They disappeared into shadow after about 10 feet. No movement, no sound, just still air rising from below. Cold, but different from outside, stale and sealed. Ethan stood slowly. His eyes moved around the kitchen again. Everything above looked abandoned, forgotten. But below, that was something else. He stepped back from the opening, listened, counted. Nothing. He glanced at Bruno. The dog met his eyes again. Steady, ready. Ethan gave a small nod. "All right," he said. Slow and quiet. He stepped toward the opening, lowered himself onto the first step, tested his weight. Solid. No shift. No sound beyond the faint creak of his jacket. He moved down one step, then another, each movement controlled, measured. While his breathing stayed even, his grip steady. Bruno followed behind him now, Not rushing, not pushing ahead, staying just close enough to react if needed. They reached the bottom. Ethan's boots touched concrete. The space opened up around them, larger than expected. The beam of the flashlight swept across the room. Bare walls. No furniture. Just a door. Heavy. Steel, set into the far wall. Ethan stopped. Didn't move closer. Not yet. His eyes tracked the edges of the room. Corners, ceiling, floor. Looking for wires, triggers, anything out of place. Nothing obvious. Too clean. That bothered him more. Bruno moved slightly to the side, sniffed the air, then let out a low, controlled sound. Not alarm, not warning. Recognition. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yeah," he said under his breath. "I see it." He stepped forward slowly, 1 foot at a time, closing the distance to the door. The steel surface was dull and worn, but intact. No rust eating through it, no damage. Maintained, or at least preserved. Ethan reached out. His hand hovered just above the handle. He paused. Listened. Nothing. No breathing on the other side. No movement. Just silence. But not empty silence. The kind that felt like it was holding something back. Ethan's fingers closed around the handle. Cold metal pressed into his palm. He didn't pull. Not yet. Behind him, Bruno shifted slightly. Ready. Ethan took one slow breath. Then another. Then he pulled. The door didn't open right away. It resisted. Then with a low, heavy click it gave. And the darkness beyond it felt different. Deeper. Waiting. Ethan didn't step through. Not yet. He just stood there, holding the door open, staring into whatever had been hidden down here for years. And for the first time since stepping into the farmhouse, he understood something clearly. This place hadn't been abandoned. It had been sealed. Ethan stood in the doorway for a long moment, not frozen, not afraid, just still. The flashlight beam stretched into the darkness beyond the steel door, catching dust that hadn't moved in years. It hung there, suspended, like the air itself had been told not to breathe. Bruno stepped forward first, not rushing, not hesitating. One careful step past Ethan's leg, then another. Ethan didn't stop him this time. He followed. The room beyond the door opened wider than the one behind it. Concrete walls again, but smoother here, cleaner, well more finished. The kind of work no one did unless they planned for it to last. The beam of light swept across the space. Shelving units lined one wall. Metal, empty. Another wall held cabinets, closed, locked, and in the center, a reinforced table bolted into the floor. Ethan moved slowly along the edge of the room, eyes scanning. Corners, ceiling, no vents. No obvious exits. No signs of forced entry. No dust disturbed near the walls. This place hadn't just been sealed, it had been protected from time. Bruno circled once, then stopped. Not at the table. Not at the cabinets. Near the far corner, Ethan watched him. The dog lowered his head, pressed his nose close to the floor, then tapped once, twice. Same motion as upstairs. Ethan's chest tightened slightly. He walked over, crouched again. The concrete felt solid under his hand. Cold, smooth. He knocked once, a dull, heavy sound. He shifted a few inches, knocked again. Different, hollow, barely, but there. Ethan leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. This whole place, he muttered. Bruno stepped back, giving him room again. Ethan set the flashlight on the table, angling the beam toward the floor. Then he ran his fingers along the surface, looking for seams, edges, anything. At first, nothing. Then a faint line, so thin it almost disappeared unless the light hit it just right. Ethan traced it with his fingertip. A square, cut cleanly. Precision work. His jaw tightened. Layer under layer. He whispered. Bruno didn't move, didn't look away. Ethan stood, grabbing the pry bar again. He positioned it along the edge of the seam. Paused. Listened. Still nothing. But something in his chest felt tighter now. Not fear. Anticipation. The kind that came right before something broke open. He pushed down. The bar slipped slightly at first, then caught. Ethan adjusted his grip and applied more pressure. The concrete plate didn't crack, didn't splinter. It shifted. Barely. But enough. A low grinding sound vibrated through the room. Deep, heavy. Ethan flinched again. Not outwardly, but his breath shortened just for a second. The sound echoed. Not here. Somewhere else. Louder. Closer. He blinked hard, forced the image away, focused. Bruno stayed steady, unmoved. Ethan pushed again. The plate lifted slightly, enough to slide his fingers underneath. He set the pry bar aside and gripped the edge. Pulled. Slow. Controlled. Yet the concrete piece rose with effort, revealing a darker void beneath. Colder air rushed up, this time sharper, cleaner, not stale. Ethan froze halfway through the motion. His eyes narrowed. That didn't make sense. Air shouldn't move like that in a sealed space. He held still, listening. No wind. No draft. Just pressure shifting. Bruno stepped closer to the opening, then stopped abruptly. His ears snapped forward, body rigid. That low sound returned in his throat. Different now, tighter. Ethan set the concrete slab down gently beside the opening. He didn't lean in right away, didn't rush. He waited, counted his breathing, watched the air, nothing visible. But the feeling didn't leave. This place breathes, he said quietly, not as a metaphor, as a fact. Bruno didn't respond, but he didn't argue either. When Ethan reached for the flashlight again and angled it down into the opening, another set of steps, narrower this time, steeper, leading deeper, but the light didn't reach the bottom. It swallowed the beam halfway down. Ethan's grip on the flashlight tightened slightly. He tilted his head, listening past the silence. Then, a faint sound. So faint, it could have been nothing. A shift. A soft movement of air, or something else. Ethan's body reacted instantly. He straightened, stepped back from the opening, raised the light, scanning the room again. Bruno moved in sync with him. Positioning. Ready. They held like that for several seconds. Then a minute. Nothing followed. No footsteps, no voices, no movement. Just that same quiet pressure. Ethan lowered the flashlight slightly, exhaled. But his posture didn't relax. Not fully. He glanced down at Bruno. You hear it? Bruno's ears twitched once. That was enough. Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. I know. He looked back at the opening, then at the steel door behind them, then at the stairs leading up. Options, always options. He ran through them quickly. In, out, wait, watch. But the longer he stood there, the more it felt like something below was waiting for him to choose. Not pushing, not chasing. Just waiting. Ethan's jaw set. He adjusted his grip on the flashlight, then reached for the pry bar again. Stay close, he murmured. Bruno didn't move ahead this time, didn't lead. He stayed at Ethan's side, matching him step for step. Ethan moved toward the opening again, slower now, more deliberate. He placed one foot on the first step, tested, solid, then the second. The air changed as he descended. Colder, but cleaner. More alive. Each step echoed faintly against the concrete walls, controlled, contained. Bruno followed just behind him, silent, alert. They moved down together, deeper, past the edge of the flashlight's comfortable reach, into the part of the darkness that didn't feel abandoned at all. Ethan's breathing stayed even, his mind sharp, every sense tuned, every movement measured. And somewhere beneath that control, a single thought settled in, clear, unavoidable. Whatever had been hidden here was never meant to be forgotten, only buried deep enough that no one would ever find it, except a dog who never forgot. The stairs narrowed as they went down. Ethan kept one hand close to the wall, fingers brushing the concrete just enough to feel for changes, cracks, seams, anything out of place. His boots moved carefully, toe first, weight controlled. Each step placed before it was committed. Bruno stayed just behind his left leg, not leading, not lagging, holding position. That alone told Ethan everything he needed to know. This wasn't a search anymore. This was an entry. At the bottom, the space opened again. Not like the room above, larger, deeper. The flashlight beam stretched out and kept going. Concrete gave way to reinforced walls, steel supports, Clean lines that spoke of planning, money, and intent. Ethan stepped off the last stair, paused, listened. Nothing. No hum of machinery, no drip of water, no movement. But the air felt different here. Conditioned. Still, but not stale. Bruno moved forward slowly. His paws clicked softly against the floor. The sound tight, contained, swallowed quickly by the space. Ethan followed. The beam of light swept across the room and stopped. A vault, not a metaphor, not guesswork, a real one. Steel door, open. Inside, shelves, boxes, files. Ethan didn't move for a second. His breathing slowed. His grip tightened on the flashlight. This wasn't random. This wasn't hidden junk or forgotten storage. This was organized, deliberate. Bruno stepped inside first, nose low, then higher, scanning. Ethan stepped in after him. The temperature dropped slightly, cooler, drier, preserved. The shelves were filled, not cluttered, ordered. Metal cases lined one wall. Each one labeled. Numbers, dates. Ethan moved closer. His free hand hovered just above one of them. Didn't touch it. Not yet. He turned the flashlight slightly. The beam caught something on the opposite side of the room, a table, not like the one above. This one held stacks of documents, folders, binders, paper that hadn't yellowed the way it should have. Ethan walked toward it slowly. Each step quieter now, more controlled. He reached the table, set the flashlight down, picked up the top folder, opened it. Inside, numbers, rows, columns, account statements. He flipped a page, then another. More of the same, except the numbers didn't make sense. Too large. Too clean. Too structured. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. He turned another page, then another. Each one more precise than the last. Transfers. Allocations. Investments. The kind of language he didn't need to fully understand to recognize. Money. A lot of it. He closed the folder halfway, paused, then looked at Bruno. The dog stood near the far shelf now, watching him. Not curious, not confused, waiting, like he'd brought him here for this exact moment. Ethan exhaled slowly. "All right," he muttered. He set the folder down, reached for another. This one heavier, thicker. He opened it. Property records. Maps. Coordinates. Ethan leaned closer. The flashlight beam shifted slightly as his shoulder brushed it. The light fell across a line near the bottom of the page. He read it once. No. Then again. His jaw tightened. Din. Grax. His jaw. 265 million, he murmured. The words didn't land right. Not at first. They didn't fit the space. Didn't match the barn. Not the cold. The dirt. He stared at the number, then flipped back. Checked again. Same result. Ethan let out a slow breath. Not disbelief, not exactly, just recalibration. He closed the folder carefully, set it back down, then reached for a metal case. It was heavier than it looked. He unlatched it, opened it. Inside were documents sealed in plastic and official certificates bearing stamps. Names, signatures. Everything precise, everything real. Ethan didn't rush, didn't dig through everything at once. He moved piece by piece, reading, scanning, building the picture. Bruno shifted slightly behind him. A soft movement. Ethan glanced back. The dog had turned toward the stairway. Ears forward, body still, listening. Ethan froze. The room held its breath. He didn't move, didn't speak, just listened. Nothing came, no footsteps above, no sound from the house, just silence. But Bruno didn't relax, didn't turn back. Ethan's eyes drifted toward the stairway, then back to the documents, then to the vault around him. 265 million. Hidden. Buried. Sealed. And someone had known enough to protect it, to trap the house above, to keep people out. Ethan's jaw tightened. "This isn't forgotten," he said quietly. Bruno's ears twitched. Ethan nodded once. "Yeah," he added. "Not even close." He reached for another folder, opened it. More names, more signatures. But this time something caught. A name different. Familiar. Not because he knew it personally, but because he'd heard it before. Somewhere else. Briefing room. Dim lights. Maps on a screen. A voice reading off names. Ethan stilled and his eyes locked on the page. He read it again. Slow. Careful. Letting it settle. Then he leaned back slightly. The air in the room felt heavier now. Not from the space. From the weight of what he was looking at. This isn't just money, he said under his breath. Bruno didn't respond. Didn't need to. Ethan closed the folder. Set it down. Then stood slowly. His eyes moved across the vault again. Every shelf, every case, every piece of paper. This wasn't hidden wealth. This was something built, maintained, and protected for a reason. And that reason was still out there. Watching, waiting. Ethan picked up the flashlight again. Turned slightly toward the stairs. Bruno shifted with him. Ready. Ethan's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. We're not alone in this. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. Because somewhere beyond the walls, beyond the farmhouse, beyond the quiet land that everyone had forgotten, something had already started moving, and now it knew someone had found the vault. Ethan didn't rush. That was the first thing he forced himself to do. Not rush. The instinct was there. Pack everything. Move fast. Get out. Disappear before whatever was out there closed in. But instinct got people killed. Control kept them alive. He stayed where he was. Counted his breathing. Let his eyes move slowly across the vault again. This time not looking for value. Looking for context. Patterns. Ownership. Purpose. Bruno remained near the stairs. Body angled toward the way out. Ears forward. Holding that same quiet tension. Ethan stepped back to the table. Picked up the folder again. The one with the name. And he opened it slowly. Let the pages fall into place. And there it was. Colonel Marcus Hale. The name sat there as if it belonged. Like it had always been part of something bigger. Ethan stared at it longer this time. Not just reading. Remembering. The room shifted. Not physically. Inside his head. A briefing room. Low light. Men standing around a table. Maps pinned to a board. Someone speaking. Hale's operations didn't leave footprints. Clean extractions. Minimal trace. If he was in the AO, you wouldn't know until it was already over. Ethan blinked. The vault came back. Concrete walls. Dustless air. The weight of the silence. He looked down at the page again. Same name. Same spelling. Not coincidence. His jaw tightened slightly. Colonel? He murmured. Bruno's ear flicked behind him. Ethan flipped the page. Photographs. Black and white. Old. A man standing in front of a structure. This structure. The farmhouse. But different. Newer. Cleaner. Alive. The man stood straight. Posture sharp, even in stillness. Military. No question. Ethan leaned closer. The face was younger in the photo, but the bearing hadn't faded. Didn't soften. It never did. Marcus Hale, Ethan said quietly. Bruno shifted behind him. A soft movement. Ethan turned slightly. The dog had moved closer now. Not toward the table. Toward a lower shelf along the wall. He lowered his head. Sniffed once. Then pawed gently at something. Not digging. Just indicating. Ethan stepped over. Knelt beside him. A smaller case. Different from the others. Less formal. More personal. Ethan opened it. Inside. Photographs. More recent. One was in color. Faded but intact. He picked one up. His fingers slowed. The image showed a man kneeling beside a young German shepherd. Hand resting on the dog's shoulder. Both of them looking directly at the camera. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. The dog in the photo. The markings. The build. The posture. He didn't need to check twice. He already knew Bruno. Younger. Smaller. But unmistakable. Ethan's grip on the photograph tightened just a fraction. He looked over his shoulder. Bruno stood there, watching him. Still, quiet. Ethan turned the photo slightly, angling it toward the dog. Bruno didn't react like most dogs would. No tilt of the head. No curiosity. Just recognition. Stillness. Ethan looked back at the image. Then, at the name in the file. Then at the vault around him, The pieces didn't just connect, they locked together. "You've been here before," he said quietly. Bruno didn't move, didn't deny it. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Not just here," he added. "With him." The dog's ears twitched once. That was all. Ethan sat back on his heels, the photograph still in his hand. Colonel Marcus Hale, military, operations that didn't leave a trace. And now a vault, hidden under a farm everyone avoided. $265 million sealed, protected. Ethan's mind worked through it piece by piece. Not fast, accurate. Whoever Hale had been, he hadn't just built this. He had hidden it on purpose. And not from strangers. From people who knew where to look. Ethan placed the photograph back into the case, carefully, like it mattered, then stood. His eyes moved across the vault again. But this time he wasn't seeing shelves or documents or numbers. He was seeing intent. Every inch of this place had been designed, layered, protected, and now exposed because of one thing. One constant. Bruno. Ethan glanced down at him. "You didn't forget," he said. Bruno held his gaze. "Steady." Ethan nodded once. "Yeah," he added quietly. "Figures." A faint sound echoed from above. Not loud, but wrong. Ethan's head snapped toward the stairs. Bruno was already moving, positioning himself between Ethan and the exit. Low, ready. Ethan killed the flashlight instinctively. Darkness swallowed the vault. Total. But his eyes adjusted fast. Years of it, operating in less. Listening mattered more now. He didn't move, didn't breathe deeper than necessary. Just listened. A shift. Above. Wood. Not a floorboard. Weight. Ethan's jaw tightened. Someone was in the house. Bruno let out a low, controlled growl. Not loud, but enough. Ethan reached down, resting his hand lightly against the dog's shoulder. Grounding, not calming, aligning. "We're not alone," he whispered. The words barely left his mouth. But they didn't need to, because the moment they settled, another sound came from above. Closer, more certain. And this time it didn't sound like the house. It sounded like footsteps. Ethan stayed still in the dark. The old instinct came back, cold and clean, stripping everything down to distance, timing, direction. He counted 2 beats between each creak above them. Slow steps, careful. Not random drift from settling wood. Not wind. Weight. Human weight. Bruno's growl stayed low in his chest. Not so faint. Ethan felt it more than heard it through the hand resting against the dog's shoulder. Someone had entered the farmhouse. Someone who knew enough to move quietly. Ethan leaned close to Bruno's ear. Hold. The dog didn't shift. Another step overhead. Then silence. Ethan let the silence stretch. Men who knew what they were doing often paused the same way. Waiting for movement below. Waiting for fear to make noise for them. He slid 1 foot back, easing toward the steel door without breaking contact with Bruno. The vault walls held the dark close, swallowing outlines. He could barely make out the square of deeper black that marked the stairwell. He didn't reach for the flashlight. Light was a confession. A faint scrape came from above, metal against wood. Then a board answered with a dry complaint. Oh, the intruder was near the kitchen, near the first hidden hatch. Ethan's jaw tightened. That meant one of 2 things. Either the man had followed them, or he already knew the place. Neither option helped. He bent, fingers closing around the photograph case by the lower shelf, then the folder with Marcus Hale's name. Not the whole vault. Not the money documents. Just what he could carry without fumbling. You didn't strip an objective under pressure. You took the pieces that changed the picture and got out alive. Bruno shifted suddenly, not toward the stairs, toward the lower shelf again. Ethan frowned and followed the movement with his eyes. The dog nudged the shelf with his nose, then pawed once at the narrow gap between the metal frame and the wall. Not frantic, specific. Not now, Ethan whispered. Bruno did it again. Ethan stared a beat longer, then crouched and ran his fingers into the gap. They brushed paper. No. Leather. Flat. Tucked deep. He pulled it free. A weathered field notebook, dark brown and worn soft at the corners. No title, just initials pressed into the cover. M.H. Ethan looked at Bruno. The dog stood very still, eyes fixed on the notebook, then lifted his gaze to Ethan's face. A memory flickered hard and fast. Afghanistan. A shattered mud wall. Bruno refusing to move past a collapsed doorway until Ethan found the pressure plate under the dust. The handlers used to say the dog didn't just find scent, he found pattern, intention. The thing that mattered most in the chaos. Another footstep above. Closer. Ethan slid the notebook inside his jacket. Good call, he breathed. Bruno turned toward the stairs again. The growl in his chest deepened. Ethan moved with him this time. Each step deliberate. The pry bar balanced in one hand. At the steel doorway, he stopped and listened. Nothing. Then, a hard, sudden thump from above. Not careful now. Searching. The intruder had found the loose boards in the kitchen. Ethan saw the layout in his head. Hidden room. Secondary shaft. One known route, in and out. If that man lifted the hatch and came down while Ethan and Bruno were still at the bottom, the stairwell would become a funnel. Tight. Blind. Bad odds. He needed another exit. Fast. He turned the flashlight on and cupped the lens with his palm, letting only a sliver of light leak across the walls. Concrete. Shelving. Cases. Steel. No obvious door. Bruno was already moving along the back wall, not sniffing at random, tracing the base of the concrete with quick, short breaths. Ethan followed, keeping the light low. The dog reached the far corner and stopped beside an old military footlocker, tucked behind a stack of empty archive boxes. He pawed the floor once, then jammed his nose under the footlocker handle and shoved. The locker scraped sideways a few inches. Behind it, nearly invisible beneath dust, was a vertical seam in the wall. Ethan's pulse gave one hard knock against his ribs. "Come on," he murmured. He set the light on the floor, grabbed the footlocker with both hands, and dragged it farther aside. Underneath the dust, a narrow steel latch sat flush against the concrete. Above them came the sharp crack of boards being pried loose. Too late to think. "Just move." Ethan pulled the latch. For a second, nothing happened. Then a section of wall released with a dull internal click and opened inward a few inches. Cold air touched his face. Fresh air. Outside air. Bruno slipped through the gap first. Ethan grabbed the flashlight, the Hale folder, and the pry bar and followed, dragging the panel shut behind him until it seated with a soft metallic thud. Darkness swallowed him again. Different darkness now. Narrower, earthier, a tunnel. Concrete at first, then packed dirt over rough stone. It angled upward. Steep, but passable. Ethan crouched automatically, one hand brushing the wall, the other keeping the light low and tight. Bruno moved several feet ahead, a pale shape in the beam, climbing without hesitation. Above and behind them, muffled by stone and earth, came a distant sound, the hollow boom of the vault door closing. Whoever was in the house had gone down. Ethan kept moving. The tunnel twisted once to the left, then rose sharper. The ceiling dropped so low he had to duck. Dirt rained lightly from above with each step. The smell changed, too. Mold. Roots. Cold pine. Near the top, Bruno stopped so suddenly, Ethan nearly ran into him. The dog stood rigid, ears high. Ethan killed the flashlight. They waited. A long second. 2. Then Ethan heard it. Not behind them. Ahead. Very faint. The rasp of wind through brush. No footsteps. No engine. Just the natural world again. Bruno moved. One more turn and they came to a narrow wooden hatch hidden beneath a tangle of dead roots and grass. Bruno pressed his nose to it. Ethan shoved from below. The hatch lifted. Gray afternoon light spilled in. They emerged on the north slope behind the farmhouse, about 50 yards uphill in a stand of pines thick enough to hide a truck. From here, the house looked smaller, meaner somehow, crouched under the sky. Ethan dropped the hatch closed and pulled brush back over it. Then he crouched in the trees and finally let himself look. A black pickup sat near the side of the farmhouse where there had been nothing earlier. No plates on the front bumper, mud up the doors. Engine cold enough that no heat shimmer rose from the hood. One man stood near the kitchen entrance. Tall, dark jacket, cap pulled low. He held a crowbar in one hand. Ethan studied him through the branches. Posture civilian, not military. But the way he kept looking over his shoulder told Ethan he understood risk. He wasn't scavenging, he was checking. Bruno gave the smallest huff through his nose. Ethan touched his neck. No, the dog settled, though his eyes never left the man. For nearly a minute, they watched from concealment. Then the stranger disappeared back into the house. Ethan counted to 20. Still nothing. No second man. No movement at the truck. He should have left then. Taken the notebook and the file and gotten clear. That would have been the smart move. But Bruno turned his head and looked at him in a way Ethan couldn't explain. Not anxious, not pleading, intent. Then the dog lowered himself to the pine needles and set one paw over Ethan's boot as if pinning him there for a second. Ethan frowned. What? Bruno's gaze shifted to the photograph folder tucked beneath Ethan's arm, then back toward the house, then to Ethan again. And in that small sequence, those three movements, something slid into place. The photograph, Marcus Hale. Bruno as a young dog. The hidden notebook. The second escape route the dog had known without smelling for. Ethan looked at Bruno for a long moment. You didn't just come back here, he said quietly. The dog's ears twitched. You were brought here. Bruno held his gaze. No wag, no movement, just that same stillness. Ethan's throat tightened for reasons he didn't examine too closely. In the military, men like to say dogs lived in the moment. No regrets, no ghosts, no past. But Bruno had led him across a dead field in the dark, through a trapped house, down into a hidden vault, and straight to a notebook tucked where only memory could have found it. This wasn't luck. This wasn't animal curiosity. This was a route. A mission line burned into the dog so deeply, he had carried it through years, through transfers, through war, through whatever had happened after Marcus Hale vanished. Bruno wasn't just protecting Ethan, he was finishing something. Ethan reached out and put both hands on the shepherd's head, fingers buried in the thick fur around his ears. All right, he whispered. The words came rough. I get it now. From the farmhouse below came a new sound. One sharp curse carried thin on the wind. The man inside had found the empty vault, had found the open shelf, had realized someone had beaten him there. Bruno rose at once, muscles coiling. Ethan picked up the flashlight, the pry bar, and the files. His eyes moved to the black pickup, then to the tree line running north toward the creek bed. Covered route. No skyline exposure. Better movement. He angled his body that way. Bruno matched him. But before they moved, Ethan looked once more toward the farmhouse, and the black shape crouched against it, then down at the weathered notebook under his jacket. Marcus Hale. Whatever had been hidden here hadn't ended with the man's death. And whatever Bruno remembered, it had just turned the vault from a lucky find into something far more dangerous. Ethan rose into a crouch and started through the trees. Bruno went with him, silent at his side, carrying not just scent or instinct, but what felt like the last orders of a dead man. They moved through the trees without speaking. Ethan kept his path tight along the natural cover, stepping where the ground gave least resistance, avoiding dry branches, staying off open patches where the light could catch movement. Bruno mirrored him. No leash, no command, just alignment. Downhill toward the creek, out of sight and out of the open line. Ethan didn't stop until the farmhouse disappeared completely behind the slope and the trees thickened enough to swallow the view. Only then did he slow, not stop, just slow. He crouched near a fallen log, scanning back uphill through a narrow gap in the branches. The black pickup was still there. No movement, no second man. But that didn't mean anything. Ethan had learned that lesson long ago. Bruno stood beside him, chest rising steady, ears still angled back toward the farmhouse, waiting, listening. Ethan reached inside his jacket and pulled out the notebook. Marcus Hale. He flipped it open carefully. The pages were worn but intact, filled with tight handwriting, notations, coordinates, references. Some entries were simple, dates, locations, supply counts. Others were less obvious. Short lines and abbreviations. Transfer complete. Site secured. Trust compromised. Adjust channels. Do not return to AO. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He turned another page, then another, until one line stopped him. Asset remains viable. Secondary route maintained. Dog retains memory. Ethan's grip tightened slightly. He read it again, then looked down at Bruno. The dog met his eyes. Still. Ethan exhaled slowly. You weren't just part of it, he said quietly. You were part of the plan. Bruno didn't react, didn't need to. Ethan closed the notebook and slid it back into his jacket. Then he listened. Wind through the trees, water moving slow over stone, and beneath that, something else. Distant, faint, an engine. Ethan's head lifted slightly. Bruno's ears snapped forward. They both turned toward the same direction. Not the farmhouse. The road. Ethan moved immediately. No hesitation. He shifted position along the tree line, keeping low, moving parallel to the sound. Bruno stayed tight at his side, matching every change in pace without needing to be told. They reached a point where the trees thinned just enough to give a partial view of the road below. Ethan dropped into a crouch, looked through the brush. A black SUV rolled slowly along the dirt road. Different from the pickup. Cleaner, newer. It didn't pass by. It slowed, then stopped. Ethan's jaw tightened. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Mid. 40s. Maybe older. Clean clothes. Not local. Not someone from the gas station. Or the store. He stood still for a moment, scanning the area, not casually, carefully. Ethan watched the way his head moved, measured. Well, not searching for landmarks, searching for signs. Then the man looked up toward the farmhouse and didn't move, just stood there, watching. Bruno shifted slightly beside Ethan, a low sound built in his chest. Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. Hold, he whispered. The man by the SUV reached into his coat and pulled out a phone. He made a call. Short. Brief. Then he turned and looked directly toward the tree line. Toward Ethan. Not exactly at him, but close enough. Ethan didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe deeper than necessary. The man held that direction for a few seconds. Then he nodded once to himself, got back into the SUV, and drove off. Ethan stayed crouched long after the vehicle disappeared, counting, waiting. Bruno didn't relax, not even slightly. Finally, Ethan shifted back from the brush. They're not guessing, he said quietly. They know. Bruno's ears flicked. Ethan nodded once. Yeah. He looked back toward the farmhouse, hidden now behind distance and trees. But it didn't feel far. Not anymore. It felt exposed. Ethan stood slowly, adjusted his jacket. We don't go back tonight, he said. Bruno looked up at him. Ethan held his gaze. They'll be watching it. A pause. Then we move. The sun dipped low as they reached the edge of town. Ethan didn't go through the main road, didn't pass the store, didn't give anyone a reason to notice. He circled wide, cutting behind buildings, staying out of open sight lines, using shadows where he could. Bruno stayed close, quieter now, but not relaxed. Ethan reached the barn just as the last light faded from the sky. He stepped inside, closed the broken door behind him as much as it would go, then stood still, listening. Nothing followed them. No engines. No footsteps. No voices. But the quiet felt thinner now, less safe. Ethan moved to his corner and sat down slowly. The wood in his hand rested across his lap, not for comfort, for readiness. Bruno didn't lie down. He stayed near the entrance again, always watching. Ethan pulled the notebook out once more, opened it under the dim light filtering through the cracks in the barn wall. His eyes moved across the pages again, slower this time, more focused. Then he saw it, a page near the back. Different handwriting, short, sharp. Lang has eyes on the property. Delay activation. Trust no one. Ethan's jaw tightened. Lang. He closed the notebook, looked up. The barn felt smaller now, and the walls closer, the night outside heavier. They're ahead of us, he said quietly. Bruno turned his head slightly. Ethan nodded once. Yeah. He leaned back against the wall, eyes open, not even pretending to sleep. Because now, this wasn't about finding something hidden. This was about holding on to it and staying alive long enough to understand why it had been buried in the first place. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying something distant, faint, hard to place, but Ethan didn't ignore it. He never ignored anything anymore. The people who had sealed that vault were already closing in. Ethan didn't lie down, didn't even try. He sat with his back against the barn wall, knees slightly bent, one hand resting on the piece of wood across his lap, the other tucked inside his jacket, where the notebook pressed against his ribs. Bruno stayed at the entrance. Same position, same angle, watching the dark. Time moved slow, not measured in minutes, but in sounds. Whined across the boards. A distant branch shifting. The hollow creak of the barn settling. Ethan tracked each one, filtered, discarded, until a new sound slipped in, soft, close. Too close. Bruno reacted first. Not barking, not moving forward, just stillness, total. His body locked in place, ears sharp, head angled slightly to the right. Ethan didn't move. Didn't even look. He let his hearing stretch outward instead. And there it was. A footstep. Outside, just beyond the barn. Light. Careful. Ethan's grip tightened. His breathing slowed. Another step. Then silence. The kind that wasn't empty. So, the kind that waited. Ethan leaned his head slightly, just enough to catch a different angle of sound. Nothing. Whoever was out there, they knew how to move. Bruno shifted 1 inch forward. Low. Ready. Ethan's voice barely left his lips. Hold. The dog froze again. Then, a shadow crossed the gap in the barn wall. Fast. Gone. Ethan moved. Not toward it. Away from it. 2 steps back, angle change, better line, better cover. He didn't chase, didn't react, because this wasn't a fight yet. This was pressure, testing, seeing how he moved, seeing if he'd panic. He didn't. Minutes passed. Nothing came. No second step, no voice, no attempt to enter. Just the wind again. But it didn't matter. The message had already been delivered. Ethan exhaled slowly. They're close, he said. Bruno didn't look back, and didn't need to. Ethan nodded once. Too close. By first light, Ethan was already moving. No hesitation now, no circling, no watching from a distance. The line had been crossed. They knew. And that changed everything. He packed light. Just what mattered. The notebook, a few documents from the vault, the pry bar, nothing else. No weight he couldn't carry fast. Bruno stayed tight at his side. No wandering now. No pulling toward the farmhouse. That part was done. Now, they moved. The town felt different in the morning. Not louder, not busier, just aware. Ethan kept his head down as he walked past the edge of the main road. Didn't stop, didn't slow, but he saw it. A black SUV parked near the gas station, the same one, clean and out of place. The man from yesterday stood near it, talking to someone else. Another man stood with him, older and sharper. Ethan didn't look twice, didn't need to. He already knew. Bruno's ears flicked once. That was enough. Ethan kept walking, didn't turn, didn't react, but his path changed. Subtle, just enough. Not toward the barn, not toward the farmhouse. Somewhere else. An hour later, they reached the edge of a small property outside town. A single-story house with white paint peeling from the siding. A truck in the driveway. No curtains covered the windows. Ethan stopped at the edge of the yard, watched, listened, then walked forward. Bruno stayed close. The door opened before Ethan reached it. A woman stepped out, in her mid-30s. Sharp eyes, calm posture. Not surprised. Ethan Walker, she said. Not a question. Ethan stopped a few feet away, studied her. You know my name, he said. She nodded. I know a lot of things. A pause. Then Rachel Cole. Ethan didn't react, but something in his eyes shifted. Recognition. Not personal. Professional. Journalist, he said. She gave a small nod. Investigative. Ethan glanced once behind him, then back at her. You've been watching the farm. She didn't deny it. Not just me. Ethan stepped closer. 1 step. Bruno moved with him. Silent. Controlled. You know what's under it, Ethan said. Rachel held his gaze. I know something is, she replied. Didn't know what. A beat. Then, until now. Ethan studied her for a long second, looking for cracks, for hesitation, for anything that didn't line up. He didn't find it. Not yet. They're moving on it, he said. Rachel nodded. I know. You know who? A pause. Then she said it. Victor Lang. Ethan's jaw tightened. The name matched the notebook, matched the warning. Rachel continued. He's been buying land quietly for years. Properties no one wants. Places like that farm. Ethan didn't speak, just listened. He doesn't miss details, she added. He doesn't move unless he knows what he's after. Ethan exhaled slowly. Then he knows now. Rachel nodded once. Yes. A long silence followed. Wind moved through the yard. Bruno shifted slightly, watching her, watching everything. Rachel glanced down at the dog. He's the reason you found it, isn't he? Ethan didn't answer. Didn't need to. She looked back up. Then you already know what that means. Ethan held her gaze. Say it. Rachel didn't hesitate. It means whatever was hidden down there. She paused. Was never meant to stay hidden forever. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. And now? Rachel stepped aside, opening the door behind her. Now, she said quietly, you decide if you're going to run from it. A beat. Or bring it into the light. Ethan stood there, still. Bruno looked up at him, waiting, not pulling, not pushing, just ready. Ethan looked past Rachel, into the house. Then back at the road. Then down at Bruno. His hand rested briefly on the dog's head. Grounding, not comfort. Alignment. Then he looked at Rachel again. His voice was low, steady. No more running. Rachel stepped back fully. The door stood open now. Ethan moved forward, Bruno at his side. And for the first time since the barn, since the farmhouse, since the vault, Ethan Walker didn't feel like he was being chased. He felt like he was stepping into something bigger, something that had been waiting. And now, he was ready to face it. Rachel's house smelled like coffee and old paper. Not messy, not pristine either, just lived in. Ethan stepped inside without hesitation, but his eyes never stopped moving. Windows, corners, entry points, sightlines. Old habits didn't fade, they just changed environments. Bruno followed, slower, more deliberate. His nose lifted, pulling in the unfamiliar scent. Ink, dust, metal. There was also the faint electrical warmth of a laptop left open on the table. Rachel closed the door behind them and locked it. One click, then another. Deadbolt. Ethan heard both, cataloged both. Sit, Rachel said, nodding toward the table. Ethan didn't sit. Not yet. He walked the perimeter first, checked the back door. He looked through the kitchen window, counted steps between exits. Only when he was done did he pull out a chair. Bruno settled beside him, not lying down, just lowering enough to keep balance. Ready. Rachel watched him for a moment. You don't turn it off, do you? She asked. Ethan shook his head once. No, she didn't push it. Instead, she slid a folder across the table. Thin, but heavy with meaning. I've been tracking Lang for 2 years, she said. Ethan didn't touch it yet. Why? He asked. Rachel leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Because people like him don't show up in small towns unless there's something worth hiding. A pause. And they don't leave unless they get it. Ethan finally opened the folder. Photos, documents, maps, properties circled in red across 3 states, old farms, abandoned facilities, storage sites, each one connected by thin lines drawn in pen. A network, quiet, hidden, deliberate. Ethan flipped to the next page. A name list, lawyers, shell companies, transfer signatures. One name circled twice, Victor Lang. Another circled once, Marcus Hale. Ethan's jaw tightened. Rachel watched him. You recognize it now, she said. Ethan nodded slowly. Not a random vault. He said, no, Not forgotten, Rachel shook her head. Never was. Ethan leaned back slightly, eyes still on the pages. This was a system. Rachel stepped closer. Exactly. She tapped one of the photos. Lang didn't create it. He inherited pieces of it. Ethan glanced up. From Hale? Rachel nodded. That's what I believe. A long silence followed. Only the hum of the refrigerator in the background. But Bruno shifted slightly, eyes flicking toward the window. Ethan noticed. Always noticed. What happens when this gets out? He asked. Rachel didn't hesitate. Everything burns. Ethan held her gaze. Good. Rachel studied him. Not just them, she said quietly. You, too. Ethan didn't look away. I've already been burned. That ended that. Rachel nodded once. Then moved to the table and pulled her laptop closer. I've been building a case, she said quietly, waiting for something real. She looked at him. You're it. Ethan slid the notebook onto the table. Marcus Hale's writing stared up at her. Rachel froze for a second, then carefully reached out, opened it. Her eyes moved fast, scanning, connecting, understanding. This, she whispered, this is enough. Ethan didn't respond. He was already listening again. Something outside, distant. Engine. Bruno stood, head up, ears forward. Rachel heard it a second later. Her expression changed. They're early, she said. Ethan was already moving. He closed the notebook, grabbed the folder. Back exit? He asked. Rachel pointed. Kitchen. Ethan didn't hesitate. Bruno was already there. They moved fast, but not loud. Never loud. Rachel followed, grabbing a camera and a hard drive from the table. Where are we going? She asked. Ethan didn't slow. Somewhere they don't expect. The vehicle came into view just as they stepped outside. The same black SUV. Closer now. Too close. Ethan changed direction instantly, cut across the yard through a narrow gap between trees. Bruno stayed tight. Rachel worked to keep pace. Left, Ethan said quietly. She followed. They moved downhill, away from the road, toward thicker cover. Behind them, a door slammed. Voices, not loud, but sharp, focused. Ethan didn't look back, didn't need to. They'll split, he said. Rachel nodded, breathing harder now. I know. Bruno stopped, just for a second, then turned sharply to the right. Ethan didn't question it. He followed, through brush, over uneven ground. Bruno led them along a narrow path, barely visible under leaves and dirt. Old, unused, but still there. After a minute, the sounds behind them faded. Not gone, but farther away. Ethan slowed, raised a hand. Stop. They paused, listening. Nothing close. Not yet. Rachel bent slightly, catching her breath. You trust him like that? She asked quietly. Ethan looked at Bruno, then back at her. I trust him more than anything else out here. Bruno's tail moved once, low, then still again. Ethan nodded. We keep moving, he said. They reached the edge of an old clearing, just as the sun dipped lower. A broken structure stood at the center. Collapsed roof, half-standing walls, but solid enough for cover. Ethan scanned it quickly. Angles, shadows, entry points. Good enough, he said. They moved inside. Rachel set her things down carefully, still catching her breath. Ethan stood near the entrance, watching. Bruno positioned himself just behind him. Same alignment. Same readiness. Rachel looked at them both, then at the notebook, then back at Ethan. You know what this means now? She said. Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked out into the fading light, at the trees, at the direction they had come from. Then he spoke. They buried it for a reason. Rachel nodded. And now? Ethan's voice didn't change. We make sure it stays buried, a beat, or we make sure it destroys everyone who tried to hide it. Rachel held his gaze. You don't sound unsure. Ethan looked down at Bruno, then back at her. I'm not. Outside, the light faded completely. The world turned quiet again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was waiting. And for the first time since this started, Ethan Walker wasn't reacting. He was choosing. And whatever came next, he would meet it head on. The night held steady around them. No engines, no voices, just the quiet breath of wind slipping through broken wood and the slow rhythm of the forest settling into darkness. Ethan didn't sleep. He sat near the opening of the collapsed structure, one knee raised, elbow resting lightly against it, eyes fixed on the tree line. Not staring, not drifting, tracking. Bruno stayed beside him, not pacing, not restless, just present. Every few minutes, the dog would shift his weight slightly, ears adjusting to something Ethan couldn't hear yet. And every time, Ethan trusted it. Rachel worked behind them, the faint glow of her laptop lighting the inside of the structure in soft pulses. The keys clicked in short bursts, then stopped, then started again, building something, piecing it together. Ethan didn't ask what. He already knew. By morning, the air had changed. Not colder, sharper, like something had broken loose somewhere far away and hadn't reached them yet. Rachel closed the laptop slowly. "It's out," she said. Ethan didn't turn. "Where?" "Everywhere that matters." A pause. "Not everything," she added. "Just enough." Ethan nodded once. Controlled, deliberate. "That'll move them." Rachel stepped closer. "They're already moving." She turned the screen slightly. Ethan glanced at it. Headlines. Short. Direct. Hidden asset network tied to former military holdings. Private trust system under investigation. Financial irregularities linked to regional land acquisitions. No names yet. No accusations. But enough. More than enough. Ethan exhaled slowly. Good. Bruno stood, not because of the words, but because of something else. Ethan felt it a second later, that shift, that tightening in the air. He rose smoothly. No rush, no panic, just readiness. "They're coming," he said. Rachel closed the laptop immediately. No questions, no hesitation. She packed it into her bag, slung it over her shoulder. "What's the move?" she asked. Ethan looked out toward the trees, then back at her. "We don't run." Rachel held his gaze. "Then what?" Ethan's voice didn't change. "We finish it." They didn't go back to the barn, didn't circle the town. Ethan led them straight toward the farm. Not fast, not slow, deliberate. Each step placed with purpose. Bruno moved ahead now, not scouting, guiding, as if something inside him had already decided the path. The trees thinned, the land opened, and Black Ridge Farm came into view again. But it wasn't empty. 2 vehicles parked near the house, doors open, no one visible. Ethan stopped at the edge of the tree line, studied the angles, the gaps, the blind spots. Then he moved, low, controlled. Bruno ahead, Rachel behind. They circled wide. Approached from the rear. Same entry point. Same broken line of approach. But this time, no hesitation. Inside, the house felt different. Not disturbed, not broken, but occupied. Recently, Ethan moved through it the way he always did. Room by room, clear, pause, listen, move. Bruno stayed tight until he stopped. At the kitchen, the same spot, the same place where it had started. The floor. Ethan stepped beside him, looked down, then knelt, pressed his hand lightly against the wood. Still solid, still sealed. But that wasn't what Bruno was reacting to. Ethan tilted his head, listened. There, faint, below, movement. Ethan's eyes narrowed. They're already in. Rachel's voice dropped. "How?" Ethan didn't answer. He was already moving, pry bar in hand. He worked the same seam, faster this time, using more force. The wood gave, not loud, but enough. The opening revealed the dark below. Same stairs, same drop, but now, not empty. Light flickered from beneath. Voices, muted. Ethan glanced at Bruno. The dog didn't wait. He moved first, down the stairs, silent. Ethan followed, Rachel close behind. The vault was no longer still. Flashlights cut across the space. Shadows moved along the walls. 3 men were searching the vault, opening drawers and pulling files, working fast rather than carefully. Ethan stepped off the last stair. Didn't hide, didn't rush, just stood there, visible. The first man turned, saw him, froze. The others followed. Silence dropped hard into the room. Then one of them spoke. "You shouldn't be here." Ethan didn't respond. He stepped forward once. Bruno moved beside him, low, steady. The man shifted his weight, not aggressive, not calm either. "Walk away," he said. Ethan's eyes didn't leave him. "This isn't yours." A beat. It never was. The man's expression tightened. "You don't understand what you're standing in." Ethan's voice stayed even. "I do." A long pause stretched between them. Rachel moved slightly behind Ethan, her hand gripping the strap of her bag. Bruno's ears angled forward. Every muscle in his body coiled, but held, waiting. The man exhaled, slow, then gave a small nod, to no one, or maybe to everything. "You just made this harder than it needed to be." Ethan didn't move. "Good." Another silence, then a sound above, distant, faint. Sirens, far away, but coming. Rachel's voice, low behind him. "They're on their way." The man's eyes flicked upward, then back to Ethan. Something changed in his face. Not fear, not anger, recognition. "You brought it out," he said. Ethan nodded once. "Yeah." The man let out a slow breath, then stepped back. Not surrender, not retreat, just done. The others followed, one by one. They moved past Ethan. No sudden moves, no words, only a quiet exit. And then they were gone. The vault fell silent again, but it wasn't the same silence. It wasn't hidden anymore. Ethan stood still for a moment, then looked down at Bruno. The dog had relaxed, just slightly. Tail low, breathing steady. Ethan reached down, ran a hand across his neck. "You did it," he said quietly. Bruno leaned into the touch, just once, then stepped back. Months later, the farm didn't look abandoned anymore. The roof had been repaired, the fields cleared, the house restored, not perfect, but alive again. Ethan stood on the porch, not watching for threats, just watching. The wind moved through the grass, soft and steady. Bruno lay near the steps, older now, slower, but still alert, always alert. Ethan didn't flinch at the sound of the wind hitting the door, didn't reach for anything, didn't turn. He just stood there, present. Rachel pulled up in her truck, stepped out, walked up beside him. "It's done," she said. Ethan nodded. "I know." She glanced at Bruno. "He's still working," she said. Ethan looked down. The dog's eyes opened briefly, then closed again. "Yeah," Ethan said. "He always will." Rachel leaned against the railing. "What about you?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked out over the land, the house, the place that had almost swallowed everything. Then he spoke. "I think I'm done running." Rachel smiled slightly. "That's a start." A long silence settled between them, not heavy, not empty, just quiet. Ethan stepped down from the porch, sat beside Bruno, rested his arm lightly across the dog's back. No tension, no readiness, just presence. And for the first time, the war inside him didn't echo back. The house didn't feel like a threat. The land didn't feel like something waiting to break. It felt still. Ethan looked out toward the horizon, then down at Bruno. For years, Ethan had thought surviving the war meant he had made it home. Sitting there with his hand resting steadily on Bruno's side, he finally understood the truth. It was the dog who had brought him home. And maybe that's the part that stays with you. Not the money, not the secret, not even the fight, but the loyalty. So let me ask you something. If you made it all the way to the end, just type 1 in the comments. And if you believe a dog can change a man's life, type dog. I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, hit subscribe, because the next story might stay with you even longer.